The Rundown with Carrie Saldo podcast is funded by Armbrook Village, offering research-based arts, music, fitness, and lifelong learning programs at their assisted living and Alzheimer's care community in Westfield. ArmbrookVillage.com.
The Rundown with Carrie Saldo is funded in part by Armbrook Village.
This is The Rundown, your weekly news and review from Western Mass. Run down. I'm Carrie Saldo. Good morning. It is Friday, February 20th, 2026. Our rundowners this week: Adam Hines, Senior Advisor at the Edward M. Kennedy Institute for the United States Senate; Jim Kinney, reporter with the Springfield Republican newspaper; and joining us by phone, Berkshire Eagle reporter Clarence Fanto. Good morning, everybody.
Morning. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Good morning.
If you have thoughts, email therundown@nepm.org. Coming up later in the show, we dive into business-related news from our region with a closer look at the Springfield Republican's annual special section Outlook. And we'll discuss two very different sides of nuclear, in fact, weapons and energy. First, some broader context for this week's news from the 413. The federal government is partially shut down. Specifically, funding for the Department of Homeland Security ran out over the weekend. And Governor Maura Healey stumped for her re-election bid here in Western Mass this week, touting her plans to increase housing. Meanwhile, allegations of millions of dollars of public benefits fraud has drawn criticism from her Republican primary challengers, and Senate Republicans want an oversight hearing. All right. A recent headline that caught my attention, unrelated to those items: Berkshire towns, school districts catch a break thanks to lower than expected increase in health insurance costs. Clarence, that headline was on your recent reporting in the Berkshire Eagle. I have lots of questions about how much, how are they doing this? How is this possible? Give us some of the details.
Well, the budget season is off to a very bumpy start for cities, towns, and school districts. And here's the backstory. They were expecting a health insurance increase of up to 18% compared to the current year. And remember, the current year was up 16% from last year. So it's a massive budget buster, the health insurance costs. A smidgen of good news, or a silver lining, is that several of the group insurers that cover most cities, towns, and school districts in the 413 and statewide for that matter, lowered their increase to 8.75%. How did they do that? Well, they eliminated coverage for those very expensive GLP-1 weight loss prescription drugs.
The popular name people hear often is Ozempic.
Wegovy, there are a bunch of them. They will still cover people who are taking those drugs because they have type 2 diabetes, but they will not cover it for weight management. So that's a big savings, but there's still a rather sizable increase, 8.75% in health insurance costs for several of these groups. There's the Berkshire Health Group, which covers half a dozen towns and half a dozen school districts in Berkshire County. And then there is the Massachusetts Interlocal Insurance Association, better known as the MIIA, which covers up to 400 cities, towns, and school districts statewide, so just about all of them. And they've adopted the same policy of some savings by not covering the weight loss drugs. The same is true of Blue Cross and Blue Shield, by the way.
So, Jim
that
Kinney,
just leaves the Group Insurance Commission, which covers state and municipal employees. And that's still up in the air because the governor's budget proposal is cutting $100 million from that commission.
Jim Kinney did some reporting this week on that Group Insurance Commission, and you wrote earlier this week about how Springfield Mayor Dominic Sardo convinced the GIC to hold off on changes that could make health insurance more expensive. How expensive are we talking about?
It would have raised the co-pays and the deductibles.
We're talking about 50% increase in some of those copays?
Yeah. Yeah, and that is the kind of thing that can tend to snowball for a family because the copay goes up, the deductible's up, people don't go, delay coverage or delay treatment, and then as the people at Bay State have explained to me 1 billion times, you delay treatment, you get worse, you show up in the emergency room really sick.
And then everyone's paying more for that care that could have been. Specifically, what is Mayor Sarno proposing in terms of this pause for the GIC?
They want more money into the system to help offset these charges, and it's a huge impact to the city's workforce and a city that's got to recruit.
Yeah, and so he's asking, sort of giving the working group time to allow some regulations at the state level to be implemented across the Commonwealth and maybe see what kind of cost impacts those might provide before any votes are taken,
Yeah,
right?
just more study and to learn more. And I think I was shocked at the impact that these weight loss drugs are having on budgets. In the kind of the revolution that's had in healthcare, apparently.
People are having remarkable results in terms of their health benefits and seeing reduction in weight, but they are very expensive. Sam Jelinas of the Daily Hampshire Gazette reporting on what local leaders are saying is straining their budgets, the cost of health insurance, as we're talking about, right up there. And respondents who were polled overwhelmingly said that they believe that the solution is to call for direct regulation of how prescription drugs are direct regulation of prescription drug costs, rather. Adam Hines, hearing that, municipal leaders are hoping that that's the solution they're looking toward. What's your reaction?
When you look at the drivers of healthcare costs in Massachusetts, it includes these costly drugs. It's also the administrative costs, and so the governor, to her credit, took some action, I believe, just earlier this year, last month, to say, look, we don't need to be spending, I think we spend something like north of $1 billion every year on just the administration of health insurance. And so trying to cut out things like the need for prior authorizations and other ways to cut down where those costs start to pile up. And so that's a big one from a state policy perspective. I can say that basically every 2-year legislative session, there was an effort to say, what are we doing to cut costs in this state? Because it is an expensive state for healthcare coverage. And so, I was glad to see her attention on that and others as well. That the towns need to come together to see if they can do more bulk purchasing and when it comes to these drugs and other ways to do it.
And we have seen some of these, like we're seeing the consortiums like Clarence is talking
right.
about, the GIC that Jim reported on. But earlier this month, President Trump announced what he is calling TrumpRx.gov. It's a website where patients can go to get reportedly decreased cost for these drugs, but the catch is they can't use their health insurance. They have to pay cash. And so there was some criticism of the way that this thing was set up, saying that perhaps the Trump family was going to benefit in some way, and also the fact that people must pay cash. So at a time when we're seeing strained budgets already in households, in municipalities, how exactly this will work to help people still remains kind of an open question. Next steps here, the GIC vote that was delayed. Jim Kinney, any idea when that might come up again?
Well, there's that task force that the governor set up and all the work that Adam talked about. That's going to have to, I think they're going to let that play out at least a little bit. And as you said, it's just a perennial problem. But all these municipalities have to do their budgets pretty quickly. So
we're coming up on the July 1st fiscal year. Well, some welcome news. Greenfield Recorder's Madison Schofield reported that Baker's Pharmacy, the only pharmacy in Western Franklin County, will reopen on Monday. They had closed in January abruptly, citing a lack of a pharmacist.
My mother will be happy to hear that.
It is a vital import. People would have to travel a long way if they didn't have access to that.
Steve Smith, my former city editor at The Republican, worked there as a soda jerk.
Wow.
As a kid, yeah.
The evolution of pharmacies, right? All right, and now to the Outlook 2026, which was in a special section of the Springfield Republican newspaper. It's an annual section that examines trends in business and the economy in Western Mass. This year's theme, The Next Big Thing, looks at how people are making the best use of our age's best new ideas. The big idea that you reported on, Jim Kinney, quantum computing. the state put some money behind at least 2 different quantum computing efforts. Start with what's happening at Holyoke Computing Center. $31 million grant there?
Yeah. It's a lot of very new high-tech equipment going into that center in the center of Holyoke. That is very difficult to get a tour of. I did tour it. You walk into a thing that looks like an airplane hangar, and it's all full of just server after server after server after server. And quantum computing, it increases the power available to them to run massive calculations and do enormous numbers of simulations for drug discovery, for bioengineering, for research into climate, for CERN dumps data.
So it's this hugely experimental, it's in a hugely experimental phase at this point, but also hugely expensive, hugely energy intensive. You wrote that it's controlled by lasers. Quantum computing operates by puffing up atoms to thousands of times their normal size and completing calculations at speeds far exceeding conventional computer processors. So this sort of like is very hard for me to wrap my head around.
It was hard for me.
But it also seems very integral to the advancement of business in the region. I think State Senator Jake Oliveira said something akin to, we might not understand how it works in the legislature yet, but we understand the importance of supporting it. Adam Hines, what do you make of this?
I think I need a quantum computer to understand quantum computing. No, I love this story. Thanks for diving into it, because it's such a hot topic now throughout the state and the country around how do we basically, address the appetite for more and more and faster computing as we move towards AI, as we move towards these big data and other ways of really kind of moving the technological train forward. And so the fact that we have the opportunity here in the region to be a part of that story is tremendous. And so having the investments to see where we can go here locally, it is an interesting pivot to the next conversation around energy as well. But this is the way of the future for sure.
We'll be talking more about that in a bit.
Hydropower is one of the reasons why they located it in Holyoke to begin with.
Access to the river.
Yeah.
It's going to be a significant investment. It expects to exceed $120 million because there'll be matching funds from 6 universities, as you reported. Yeah. UMass, Yale, Harvard, Boston University, Northeastern, MIT, all working together on this. Clarence Fanto, I know out in the Berkshires, you've got the William Stanley Business Park, other ventures like that, but they're not tackling quantum computing yet out there that I'm aware of, right?
Not that we've heard, but you never know.
It might be on the horizon.
Right.
One other thing that was interesting, Jim, is you talked about the Springfield Technology Park, and that's well suited as a data hub. Why?
Well, it really goes back to World War II. And in the 1930s, as the Pentagon, it wasn't even the Pentagon, it was the War Department then, saw the threat coming, they started to build up the capacity at the old Springfield Armory, and they built all these large buildings that are still there that had a lot of electrical capacity coming in and had big, heavy floors that could take heavy machinery. In the 1960s, as the Armory and the Army pulled out, the phone company looked at that and saw the opportunity to put equipment there. And over the years, they've just added more technology, and now there's an ongoing effort to upgrade that technology. And it was fascinating that the old technology really did pave the way for the new technology. They run the fiber optics from Boston out on the Pike, and they can use an old railroad siding that used to serve the Armory to run it right into this heart of Springfield.
It's fascinating how the previous technology is supporting the needs of today. Well, you can check out Jim Kinney's reporting along with many different aspects of what's happening in regional business in the Springfield Republican's special section, Outlook 2026. Still ahead here on The Rundown. 2 different looks at nuclear, weapons, and energy, plus scoops, praise, and prediction from our panel. You are listening to The Rundown here on 88.5 NEPM. I'm Carrie Saldo. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Rundown here on 88.5 NEPM. I'm Carrie Saldo, joined by journalists Clarence Fanto and Jim Kinney, and Adam Hines, a former state senator from the 413. Nuclear has been in the news as of late, two very different angles. We'll start with Daniel Jackson's reporting from the Springfield Republican. The headline, activists hopeful bill calling on U.S. to act to prohibit nukes advance in the State House. Quoting here, advocates for nuclear disarmament hope this year will be different. For the last few legislative sessions, a resolution in the Massachusetts State House calling on the federal government to make moves to reduce the threat of nuclear war and eventually embrace a treaty prohibiting the weapons died in committee. This time, however, advocates say the bill is before a different committee in the Senate, which may increase its chances of passage to the full legislative body. State Senator Jo Comerford of Northampton is the one who introduced this resolution. She said the bill received a favorable report earlier in the session. Adam, you left this state senate 4 years ago. There were similar resolutions introduced during your time there. I didn't see you as one of the petitioners. Tell us why you either agree or disagreed with the idea.
Well, the starting point about the need now is an important one, right? We've now so all the treaties for limiting the proliferation of nuclear weapons are non-existent. They've expired. We're seeing a dangerous and scary uptick in multiple countries saying they're going to modernize and expand, China being on that list of expanding nuclear weapons, and the current administration in the United States talking about updating and possibly expanding. And so it is a scary time. And so if there was a time for a resolution like this to move forward, it is now. I will say, it's very difficult when you have different levels of government for who's responsible for what and what you can get people to concentrate on at a given time. And so a lot of times in a situation like this, okay, we have very little to do with this, and no one's going to run to the White House saying that the Massachusetts State Legislature passed a resolution on this. So you start to just kind of prioritize where you put your time and energy. And so I think that's often what Senator Comerford has found as well.
You referenced this larger news that we heard late last month or earlier this month, that the two largest nuclear powers, Russia and the United States, no longer have any limits on their nuclear arsenals. That is reports that it's a 15-year-old treaty called the New START, and it expired. With it, caps on the number of weapons that the United States and Russia could deploy on missiles, bombers, and submarines. And also, we saw this comes at a time when the so-called doomsday clock, a metaphorical tracking of how close humankind is to destruction, moved closer to midnight. Jim, Adam hinted at this tension between federal policy, which obviously is controlling this issue, but also states weighing in. Is this something that states should be tussling with?
I think making sure a voice gets heard is important. I'm also wondering the experience of Ukraine. Does that fit into this? Because Ukraine gave up nuclear weapons in exchange for security promises. And boy, it might not be working out well for him in the end. And does that send what kind of a message does that send to all these other wannabe maybe powers or mid-level powers around the world?
Yeah.
Clarence Fanto, how about for you? What do you make of this?
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear a question.
Sorry, so we're talking about the fact that there is a petition at the state level, the state house, regarding nuclear weapons and a treaty. Senator Jo Comerford wants people to weigh in on this at the state level. And I'm just sort of talking about the fact that this is a federal issue, but obviously a state senator is now asking people to weigh in on it here in Massachusetts.
Yes, well, there have been several letters to the editor in the Eagle and elsewhere from residents, readers who are concerned about the expiration of the nuclear treaty. So it's quite possible there'll be a groundswell of public support to tackle this issue.
And it wouldn't be uncommon. We've seen California, Oregon, New Jersey, Rhode Island. They've backed the United Nations Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. There's a number of U.S. cities, Boston in 2021 among them, that have supported similar treaties. For Jo Comerford's part, she says that this is needed because, quote, We don't set nuclear policy. We absolutely should. Just because we don't set nuclear policy, we absolutely should and can have a voice about what happens at the federal level. So that's where she is landing on this issue. Clarence, you mentioned that the letters to the editors there. I imagine that this matter will continue. All right, another aspect of nuclear here this morning. Jeanette DeForge writing in the Springfield Republican. Energy experts, nuclear might be part of the solution for power shortage. When the wind doesn't blow and solar panels are covered in snow, there's another source of carbon neutral energy to be considered, even if it has a long history of being controversial. Experts are now taking a second and serious look at expanding nuclear power as part of the push to find more reliable, climate-friendly sources of electrical power. Thoughts on this, Adam Hines? I mean, it seems like something that we wouldn't have even been talking about maybe 10 years ago, as we're looking at the decommissioning of some plants here in this region.
Yeah, and I grew up not that far from one of those decommissioned plants in Rowe, nuclear Yankee Rowe, and which makes me kind of maybe say, I can't believe I'm going to say the following, which is, to the extent that there have been, let's say there are ongoing challenges of what to do with disposal. And so that's real and serious, and that needs to be a part of this conversation. Alongside that, we've also seen that there is advances in technology and improved interim storage and the like. And so when I think through, the cost benefit of the global impact of our current reliance on carbon-based fuel, what do you do to try to identify a better, maybe where there's a local negative impact, and how do you mitigate that so that we can really have the infrastructure that we need for cleaner energy?
One of the officials, Thomas Berry, the chief executive officer of the Massachusetts Municipal Wholesale Electric Company, told the Republican, quote, "It will take many hurdles, but the conversation needs to start today. I don't think this region can have a serious conversation about power generation without discussing nuclear power." Jim Kinney, what do you make of this?
It's very interesting. It's the head of the Westfield Gas and Electric told Jeanette that there is technology for smaller scale plants that might work. They're talking about the difficulty of finding new sites. So the older sites, the decommissioned sites, like Rowe, like Vermont
Yankee Nuclear,
might be where they look to do this because the infrastructure is there. I'm old enough, I remember 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania. And that being on everyone's lips for years.
As a nuclear accident. Things that can go wrong. We have Fukushima in more recent memory following a tsunami there in Japan. Some of the cons of nuclear energy that are pointed out, that it is water intensive, which you pointed out, there people were using hydropower, using water needs to be cooling these sources. It's also security intensive. People have concerns about whether or not it could become a target for some of these small cities and towns that would be around these sites. Specifically for Vermont, Clarence, I was thinking about how it stopped operating in 2014. It's scheduled to be fully decommissioned at some point later this year. I know this is reporting that the Berkshire Eagle occasionally touched on. What are you thinking when you hear, should we be using nuclear for energy?
Well, it depends on the circumstances, but it sounds like it's a resource that needs to be explored because our electric grid, our power grid, is very challenged, as we've discussed. And the Trump administration has been pushing back on wind power offshore, so it doesn't leave much to consider.
Yeah. Well, Clarence, I'll pivot us to another story from this week's news. Ahead of the 250th, a 413 area construction company wrapped its $40 million restoration of part of the Statue of Liberty. Tell us what that's all about, Clarence.
Well, 5 years ago, this company, Allegroni, which was established in Pittsfield in 1921, so they were celebrating their 100th anniversary, the National Park Service was putting out, asking for bids to do a huge repair job on the pedestal and the structure that holds the Statue of Liberty offshore in New York Harbor. A $40 million 5-year contract. The Allegroni Company won that contract. They've just finished the work doing some touch-up landscaping whenever spring arrives this year. And it was a very big project for a company that's done a lot of work in housing and commercial development in the Berkshires, historic projects in Boston and in the Albany, New York area. So talk about a feather in their cap. A lot to celebrate there.
Absolutely.
And the company founder came through Ellis Island. His name was Luigi Allegroni back in 1917. So they're in their fourth generation of Allegronis there running that company.
I should have thought about this, Clarence, to be my praise, because Lou, the most recent Lou Allegroni, they have really just been game changers for downtown Pittsfield and revitalizing these old buildings and turning them into housing, which is what we need for a lot of our downtowns in the region to have more foot traffic for shops and the like. And they just received a $1 million grant this week, if I remember,
Right.
to take on another building, the old Berkshire Bank building right downtown.
Right.
So they're really moving. It's great to see.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
if people are heading into the New York area, now they know that the Berkshires had a hand in helping Lady Liberty shine ahead of the 250th. You hinted at it, Adam Hines. Let's head to our scoops, praise, prediction portion of the show, where we ask the panel to give us a scoop that they're working on, maybe heap some praise on a newsworthy nugget, or make a prediction about the week's news. Jim Kinney, let me start with you.
I'd like to praise the people of Holyoke for fighting for a little bit of local color, a local sound, rather. The city sent a cease and desist that stopped a historic air raid siren that had blown every Friday at noon. And there'd been an anonymous complaint, some spoil sport out there. But the people are standing up, so they're in dialogue. While they can still hear each other, they're in dialogue about bringing back the thing, the foghorn or the air
I
raid
wish I had
siren.
known that you were going to talk about this. It would have been a great sound effect here
It would have been
on the show this morning.
I absent-mindedly parked next to it one Friday to take a phone call from Representative Neal. I'm not sure what he thinks happened to me.
Adam Hines, what's on your mind this morning?
Investments in outdoor recreation in Charlemont. Olympian Paula Moulton married into the family of crabapple water, or kayaking, whitewater
Rafting.
Rafting.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so congrats to her. But Berkshire East next door just bought a building, a new ski mountain in northern Vermont, Smuggler's Notch. And so they're bucking the trends of corporate takeover of our outdoor recreation, and I love to see it.
Fantastic. Clarence Fanto, scoop, praise, prediction. What's on your mind?
Prediction looks like a stellar summer season for the arts and entertainment presenters. Here in the Berkshires, Tanglewood is presenting Paul Simon on 2 nights, focusing on music celebrating the nation's 250th this summer throughout their Boston Symphony, Boston Pop season. Jacob's Pillow Dance Festival is back to a full 10-week season. And the great actor Karen Allen is back on stage for the Berkshire Theater Group at the Unicorn Playhouse in Stockbridge in an Irish play called Love Song. So a lot to look forward to.
And a bit of a twist, the Williamstown Theater Festival is going to an on and off season schedule. They will not be presenting this season, right?
They will not, and that leaves a big gap in the summer scene in Williamstown, and there's a lot of concern as to whether that festival will indeed be returning in the future.
It'll be interesting to watch the impact of that. Our rundown anthem is by the Love Crumbs. Our director is Tony Dunn. Our board op this morning is Bart Rankin. Our engineers, Phil Bishop, Kara Foster, Dave Sears, and Chuck Dubé. Production support in digital by IU Suryawan. My thanks to our rundown panel, Adam Hines, Clarence Fanto, and Jim Kinney. Happy birthday this morning. I am grateful to all of you this morning. If you have something to say about the rundown, email therundown@nepm.org. I'm Carrie Saldo. Join us every Friday right here on 88.5.